Can you just talk about kind of what's going on, in your community around kind of Corona, and then I'd love to ask you some specific questions about kind of what you're, personally dealing with and things like that.
Yeah, so I'm in San Francisco. I live at the CryptoCastle, which if people are in crypto, they've probably heard of, but I can see fine through a Google search. Um, but San Francisco's kind of been called the bellwether for the country in terms of the effectiveness of lockdown. So San Francisco, I think, was the first city in the country to lock down, and um, so far it appears that we have been able to flatten the curve here. But in addition to that, just as I think people everywhere are experiencing, there is a lot of tension. There's a lot of stress associated with what's happening, um, and there are a lot of other factors that go beyond the virus itself. A good example in San Francisco is that when the orders actually came down, almost all the bike shops closed. Um, and this is actually against the intent of the order, because obviously people depend on their bikes to get to and fro for essential activities, whether grocery shopping or getting to work, and this includes healthcare workers. So there's a particularly good example in San Francisco. There's a healthcare company called Kaiser, which is located in South San Francisco, employs thousands of
Mm.
people. They actually requested that their entire fleet, their bike fleet, tuned up because right. And uh, Unfortunately, the bike shop they actually requested to do this was closed. The owner was um, so the mayor of San Francisco actually had to issue clarification saying that bike shops were intended to stay open because they are essential people.
Right.
Whether they're essential infrastructure workers or not, people depend on them to do essential tasks like food. So you see a lot of phenomena where people are actually going far past what the orders ask for, um, and
And as
uh,
it relates to kind of like what you guys are doing in your house or your crypto community, because obviously so much of crypto is about embracing decentralization, and this is like a obviously a very interesting experiment in what that means for society right now, where everything, we're forced to kind of decentralize. So I'm curious kind of what you guys have, if there's any initiatives going on in the house or just in the crypto community at large.
yeah, so there are initiatives at large. I've been focused on the work that I'm doing here, so I had sort of taken the lead in the communities that I've organized in terms of making sure that we have uh, critical infrastructure, things that we would need in the event that this actually gets worse. There are a lot of some potential impacts beyond the virus itself. Um, so we've actually gotten set up to grow over 22 different plants here at the castle. We have actually ample capacity to grow food here. We're working on getting radio set up to forestall any kind of critical communications outages, and of course, working on getting some cryptocurrency miners set up here. Um, the circumstances we're experiencing right now, in theory, Bitcoin was built for this. It's meant to be the sort of system that uh, that's really in a class of its own in terms of robustness. Um, so Bitcoin transactions over radio, over mesh network, over a lot of different channels and media, and the network is really designed to keep functioning over these sorts of extreme circumstances. Whereas our traditional payments infrastructure, I think, is actually quite a bit more vulnerable.
Yeah, because it's interesting because we're obviously seeing, you know, the questioning whether our institutions are going to hold up in the face of this, and so like what kind of makes the the work you've been doing up until this point really apply to um, the situation at hand? Like what about it makes kind of the crypto world set up to handle kind of at least have solutions for the situations that we're facing right now?
Yeah, so sometimes the blockchain movement, called the decentralist movement, and so much of the thinking turns on not having a point of failure and not having a trusted third party. So, so many of the problems that we're seeing appear to be issues with us relying on institutions, trusting institutions that in fact have failed us, um, whether they be civic institutions or governments, and because the technology itself is designed around this principle of eliminating a trusted third party as a point of failure, um, and because people who work in this space have trained their thinking and honed their thinking around these ideas and these principles for such a long time now, I think people in the blockchain movement are better prepared than most. And that shows up in a lot of places. But in particular, just the notion that you shouldn't be relying on upstream capacity to take care of you, right? You should have capacity of your own to take care of yourself. That's the whole idea, with being a Bitcoin miner. If you're a Bitcoin miner, you process your own transactions.
Right, right. That's interesting. No, and is there not that anybody is cheering at all what's going on, but is there like I'm just generally curious, like has the kind of blockchain movement, has this been a really like, oh wow, we get to test out in a mass kind of way all these things that have kind of existed in a subgroup, like seeing, not that anybody's rooting for anything to fail and for things to fall apart, but is there some sense of like now we have a use case for so many of the things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, so I think people who are in the blockchain movement feel well positioned because of some of the things I just described. Uh, but just like the prepper community, I don't really hear too many people gloating right now or expect people to do so. If the banking system does collapse, like I don't think we'll be saying, focused on saying "I told you so." We'll be focused on like doing whatever we can to keep everything from falling apart and doing our part because we've been empowered with knowledge. So there is some complexity. I think a lot of people were surprised to see, even though it's recovered tremendously, to see Bitcoin drop with the rest of the market. And I think a lot of that is due to some of the turns that were taken in 2017 with the Bitcoin Cash fork. So the reason you see Bitcoin BTC now behaving much more like a stock is because we actually cut off much of its capacity to act as used as a currency. This was something that didn't need to happen if a result of the block size limit, a temporary constraint that Satoshi put in place, and it ended up actually reversing a lot of merchant adoption that had happened over the first decade of Bitcoin's existence. So you lose a lot of the stickiness that comes from the liquidity premiums of having it spendable across a wide array of merchants. And I think we would have seen it perform even better were it not for that.
Interesting. So you're saying now it acts more like a stock in that the volatility range is much more limited, or it just fluctuates based on sentiment in a stronger kind of way.
It fluctuates in terms of, I wouldn't necessarily say it's just sentiment, but it's much more strongly correlated with the markets than we would otherwise expect. And we're in that the merchant adoption case, I think we would have seen it perform even better than it has performed. It's still done tremendously well, uh, and I think a lot of people won't be privy to this, but there's sort of like an ongoing civil war in Bitcoin. Um, Started off with the Bitcoin Cash fork, which in turn led to the Bitcoin SV, Bitcoin Cash fork, and the right way to conceptualize this is actually it's actually much more like a religious schism where you have these with these fundamental ideological differences opposed against each other, fighting for what they believe is the truth. But I think a lot of people, when they encounter from the outside, they think it's like a stock split.
Right.
When in fact, it's much more like a religious schism than a stock split.
Interesting. And so what is your startup focused on right now, and how has that been impacted by obviously what's going on?
Yeah, so I do blockchain education and community organizing. So I have a very strong in-person approach to what I do. I only teach not online because I think it's what's best. And so for the time being, I'm not taking on students. It's untimely for me because I actually just found a new crop of students moving from Detroit to San Francisco. It took a while, longer than expected, to get back up and running. New city, but I think in part because my thinking is honed around these ideas. I have spent a long time kind of trying to get people who are in the community that I organize. So I organize a network of community in Detroit, Chicago, New York, to think about robustness and decentralization and how we can eliminate single points of failure and not be dependent, not like clients are dependent on servers, but be peers in a peer-to-peer network. And I'm hoping that over the next couple weeks, these communities, will shine and will be able to respond to what's happening, and hopefully the good will be greater than the bad as an outcome of what we're going.
Yeah. And so how did you find these students or potential students?
Yeah, so because I do community organizing, a lot of I can come through the communities just by word of mouth. So my primary lead gen is word of mouth, and I'm not a sales and marketing guy. I think people out there know that. So they basically find me.
Yeah, interesting. And so how long have you been in San Fran for at this point?
About a year. Yeah.
About a year. How's it been? Kind of like, was that always you were in San Fran, or were you never? Was this your first? Is this your first like full-time stint in San Fran?
No, I first came to San Francisco in 2013 when Bitbox was a Bitcoin exchange. We got accepted to Boost, the accelerator, and then sort of bounced back and forth between Detroit, southeastern Michigan, and San Francisco, iterating different products, iterating different co-founders, and then got stuck in Detroit for quite a while. And from there, started really honing the crypto community organizing, started Detroit blockchainers in Detroit. And I realized after attempting to launch several different crypto products and working with different crypto teams in different parts of the world, all the while doing this organizing, I had become kind of an expert, and I started teaching people in Detroit in 2017.
And so like what was the draw to San Fran?
So it's interesting. There are a lot of people who have very strong theses about being in the valley and the best for startup, and that's what drew me here. And I think those theses are definitely understood right now. They have been for a while. And I think all those arguments, all the challenges to the idea that it's best for a company in the valley, and it makes such a difference that you just should move. I think the critiques are correct, but I still think this is actually the best place in the world to do a startup, unless you're going to move to.
So what can you? I obviously know about, like, on a top line level, the house you're living in, but can you talk about kind of where you're living and how you found that group?
Yeah, so I live at a place called the CryptoCastle. It was started by the founding team of Augur. Augur was sort of like the first app on top of Ethereum. It's a predict market, and when Vitalik was going promoting Ethereum originally, uh, he had to answer the question, well, what can you build with it? Augur was the answer, and uh, so that team moved in here back in the early days. We're working closely with the founding team of Ethereum. Ethereum was being changed so that Augur could work on top of it. Augur was changing based on how Ethereum was changing, and so those teams worked very closely together. Vitalik was uh, a frequent resident on the couch here, and after that, much of the Augur team actually moved out, but over time, more and more people who were involved with crypto moved in. A guy named Jeremy Gardner, who's co-founders of Augur, actually did a lot to promote the place and brand it as the CryptoCastle. And over time, different people came in, and slowly, though, the level of the people in the house kind of dropped down, and brought a little bit more of that energy back in.
Cool. So, and this is you when you moved to Saffron. This is where you went straight here.
No, actually, I was staying somewhere else first, then actually ran out of fiat and had to find a place where I could pay crypto fast, and this was it. So.
Gotcha. So what's like? How does the house work in terms of, besides it being a physical location to spend time and sleep? Like what kind of benefits or sense of support or network does it provide for the people living there?
Yeah, so it's not really like an intentional community, and I'm hoping that'll change, and there will be a lot more of the right kind of energy flowing, and that can be taken to a new level. But I think there's something powerful about people working on a shared set of problems in close proximity to each other. But I think that the intentional piece is missing.
Gotcha. So what's with what's going on in the world right now? What's the vibe in the house?
Yeah, I mean it's not ideal. I think a lot of people probably around the world are in quarantine situations that are, let's say, tight. I'm looking forward to this ending soon, and hopefully with us all coming out of it healthier. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what you posted on Twitter the other night, like, do you think what you're dealing with being amplified because of Corona? Is it kind of like an excuse? Like what? Like how did?
I think this person is taking advantage of the situation and the timing and attempting to leverage people's fears and insecurities in order to target me. And it's not easy to talk about, but yeah, I mean it's almost hard to believe, but yeah.
And did you think, like everything you were saying before about San Fran kind of being this mecca, so to speak, of of just this place of innovation and where those types of ideas can thrive, being faced with such kind of antiquated and obviously hateful, but stuff that's so not really in line with the mantra, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a mythology that goes with the reality, and the fact is, people people are still in many ways primitive. They're racist. They're anti-Semitic. You know, what exactly brings someone to, like, one of my roommates taunted me while someone was cooking like pork in the kitchen. Like, what makes someone do that? It's confounding. And yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, I don't know if it's anything that's really particular to San Francisco. I think if we look at the whole world right now, we see this kind of thing is on the rise. And uh, we can theorize about different drivers, or point blame in different places, but I think ultimately, like, personal responsibility and, like, just showing respect to your fellow human beings. That's the line.
Yeah.
So
So as of like since you've posted that video, what has the feedback been, and what are you doing? Or are you just kind of going with it?
yeah, I made a report to the ADL. I'm also going to make a report to the NAACP. Um, I've been in situations in the past, and I experience things like this on, like, a close to daily basis, and my response is to completely ignore it, just, like, swallow it. It's a little bit different when you're kind of, like, stuck in the situation. Um, and I, yeah, I mean, I hope that I can do something to combat this, not just for myself but for other people. And yeah, I mean, I think, like, I'm really glad that I actually said something, because it allowed me to see support from other people, and to also get insight from other people. And I think, like, especially if you're feeling alone, that's really important. And for sure, like, the one thing that I wish is that I had actually, like, said something sooner.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Um, and you were saying in your Twitter video, you were saying that what was being said was like, oh, you were leaving the house too much or something like that, right? Or like what was the excuse given?
Yeah, so I'm actually a Caviar Postmates courier. Helps me support my startup. And so the order is written such that if you're doing food delivery, or if you work at a food business, that's actually critical infrastructure.
Hmm.
Um, and um, the, like, sort of really funny thing in this situation is that this person actually, like, frequently orders Caviar Postmates, and like, I think in my position, just, and this is a point where I'm privileged. I've had the education where I think I'm a little bit better prepared about how to behave under these circumstances than a lot of other people. Um, uh,
What do you
and
mean by that? What do you mean by that?
so I've been able to know, like, hey, for example, that one of the things we should be thinking about, like, even though it doesn't appear to be a problem yet, just like a lot of things didn't appear to be a problem until they were, uh, thinking about things like food security, water security, and knowing you don't, like, put your water supply in a place where you're likely to get a bacterial infection, things like that. Um, and in addition to that, because I'm an organizer, I sort of know where resources are a little bit better than other people. Um, and so I'm involved with a hackerspace here in San Francisco, working on essential infrastructure. This is a place that has a lot of capacity to respond to something like this, and we haven't had an easy time. But what I've tried to do is organize the community around providing whatever support we can safely, while also basically like having the place be shut down so people can stay home. And uh, because of things like that, like I'm in a position where I have a sort of obligation, right, as a community leader, to see for other people. I started organizing the neighborhood around the CryptoCastle. So we're able to like communicate with each other, share information. We have grocery stores in the neighborhood in this group. And people are able to, support each other through channels like this. But yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't make things easy though, I would say.
Yeah, because I mean, I leave the house probably once a day, and like, what's it been like? Obviously, not that you're like hospital essential, but you're still kind of going. You're still out and about, despite kind of what's going on because of your role as a like. What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of wonder, you know, I wonder if the guidances are fully sort of if they're led by science or if they're at the end of the day they're practical. I think for me it's not really. It's just it's a little bit. It's a bit like mechanized. Like um, I think people still have to get food, um, and I I wonder what the cost benefit is, and I don't really know the answer to that. But
Yeah. Are you the only one in the house who is has a quote unquote essential day job?
yeah, I think so.
And is that outside of the ignorant stuff that we obviously talked about? Has that been a
I
source
mean,
of stress or anxiety?
well, I think what's happening, it shines a light on like a huge class division that exists in this country. Like if you can head to Tahoe and Netflix and chill and like Skype with your team and receive your salary, you're in an extremely different position than someone who needs to work in order. So when these orders came down, I think they affect people differently. And uh, you know, absolutely, like people who are in a position of privilege. A lot of people who are in a position of privilege are actually right now they're benefiting, they're profiting from what's happening. Um, so yeah, I mean it's it's a sad situation. It's not something started with this crisis. It's kind of like structural to America in a lot of ways. And yeah,
And what do you like? Has that been a like a huge revelation for you in terms of within the kind of the crypto and the startup community that there is such kind of divides in terms of privilege and who like because there's this I think there's this sense of like, oh, everybody's all in it together, and I wonder if in times like this that feels as far from the truth as possible.
oh, it's not true. It's false. And I think we should still be working to make it true. Uh, but uh, for sure, I think I've noticed there's quite a bit more of a class division in San Francisco, and the places become more status oriented than when I was out here before. And I think that is bad for startup. Um, where really what was unique and special about this place is that it was one of the few places in the world, or maybe the only place in the world where people were very focused on helping the people who were low status, the hackers who just showed up and who had nothing but an idea. And now it's become much more status oriented, much more prestige oriented, where people want to help you if you already have status. And I think that it's probably something that's seasonal. It's like a super annual seasonality though, like El Nino. So we're maybe looking at big, 7-year cycles, where maybe after this crisis abate, we'll see that the culture here will once again turn on the little guy, the little hack, with an idea. But it's unclear. Maybe the critics are actually right, and the Valley isn't the best place to do a startup anymore.
Yeah. All right, my last question, because ideally, I mean, look, it looks like we're on lockdown at least for the next month, so we can do one of these in like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What do you? Not that I want you to just like predict what's going to happen, but I guess as far as your world, like, what do you see happening over this next month?
Yeah. So, I was really hoping that based on the data that I was consuming and the analyses that I was consuming, that we had done enough to flatten the curve. I think things have been handled extremely well in San Francisco, and that's in large part due to the mayor's leadership. But with the extension of the orders, it's extremely unlikely that the broader impact of what's happening won't affect supply chains. I actually do expect that we'll see a lot of problems, a lot of shortages, and it's not a question of whether we'll have shortages. It's a question of what and how bad will they be. And I think part of the problem that I've seen is that people think about the economy and supply chains as if they think about it like a food chain, when really they should be thinking about it like a food web. You can't just tourniquet essential infrastructure from everything else. I think things are deeply and complexly interconnected. Really what we're talking about is a complex adaptive system. So because of that, a great example is that bike shop again. We're talking about it affecting not only the healthcare workers, right? Because a healthcare company wanted its fleet tuned up so that its healthcare workers could do their essential job, but also because most of the bike shops shut down, there was an issue getting the bike shops back open because it spread up the supply to the actual bike shop suppliers. And so I think we'll see a lot of phenomena like that. It's unclear yet how bad it will be or where exactly it will hit. But I have been thinking a lot about what's really critical, what's necessary for survival, and trying to be over-prepared rather than under-prepared. So you probably saw a bit about the hydroponic setup that we're working on here at the castle. I think the way I conceptualize that, and this is an idea I got from the founder of that helped us get the setup. It's really about decentralizing food production so that we are not just interacting with the system as clients. If San Francisco, with the capacity that we have because of the climate that we have here, we could absolutely snap any kind of food crisis in the bud. But that totally depends on people acting. So I focused on taking action, and I'm hoping that's what other people will do. What ends up happening over the next several weeks will really depend on what actions people.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Matt, for doing this. We should definitely, maybe a couple weeks, we'll see what's going on. We'll do it again. But until then, stay safe.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Good to talk to you.
All right. Good talking.